Well, hello there, friends and kin. This is James D. Today I'm going to finish the introduction I started with my last video, which was part one. I knew I wasn't going to torture all of y'all, making you sit for an hour or more listening to me talk. And so since my last video, I've been brainstorming about how much detail I wanted to go into. And I said, there's a lot of information here because my story gets a little complicated. So what I'm going to do in this video, this part two to my introduction, is kind of give you the Reader's Digest condensed version, and then maybe as we progress over time, I'll zero in on some of these chapters of my life and go into a little bit more detail, especially if they become relevant to future topics that we include in our conversations. So where I left off the last time, I was talking about, I almost forgot. Today we are smoking a cigar called Blackened. This is by Drew Estate and was made in conjunction with I believe, James Hetfield of Metallica. So that was kind of cool when I found this guy. And so far, I mean, I'm about halfway through it, and it's a tasty little treat, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So hats off to Drew Estate and Mr. Hetfield. So where we left off last time, I had mentioned, how I, I find to be much more interesting the part of our background that inspired us to pick up our first witchy books and occult books. And, I talked about how I'd had various, paranormal or supernatural experiences as a child. And when I started discovering these books, it kind of helped me give a context or a framework to put these experiences in and help me make sense of it. And of course, those first few books I found were Ray Buckland's Big Blue Book, is what we call it. Uncle Bucky's Big Blue Book is what everyone calls it. And then Scott Cunningham's Wicca, Guide for the Solitary Practitioner. So many people start with that one. And I believe I gave a little bit of a defense to Mr. Cunningham, who's an author that's come under attack by many different people, and for a myriad of different reasons, and how I don't particularly share those sentiments. So that was my intro period to the magical world of witchcraft and neo-paganism. And somewhere around the age of 17, I was introduced to what I've come to call Reconstructionist paganism, because my whole reason for turning to witchcraft and occultism was really a quest for truth. You start as a kid becoming a teenager, and you start to figure out that so much of history, as it's been presented to you, has been a lie or misrepresented. And you find out, Christianity is a religion that was forced on our ancestors. Naturally, I started to get more curious about what the religion of my ancestors was. And, I learned pretty quick that Wicca, as we know it, was not an ancient tradition. It was, although it, back in those days in the 80s and 90s, it presented itself as such. And like a lot of people, I got disenchanted with it, feeling like yet again I'd been lied to and misled. And so I started investigating Reconstructionist paganism. And that started my journey with Asatru. And I have quite a colorful history with Asatru. In the beginning, I investigated. This was back in the Wild West days of the internet, where anybody could build a website and put their material out there, and there was no There was no fact checking. There was no credentials. There was nothing to prove anybody knew what the hell they were talking about. Not that any of that stuff really exists now. The illusion of it does, and that seems to make most people happy, because I question fact checking services constantly. It depends on who's paying the fact checkers and what kinds of facts they want them to find. That's a topic for another conversation. But back then, there was just no. Literally, you could find anything and everything, and without any way of knowing where the other person or the person presenting this information was getting their facts from. But as a kid, you just kind of take what you find and run with it. And I remember running across websites for the Ring of Troth, and I investigated that. I was never a member of them, but I did investigate it, and a lot of the people I associated with early on had connections to the Ring of Troth. I ended up joining an organization called SIAC, the Confederation of Independent Asatru Kindreds, and I met several good people in that organization. We tried to start an Asatru Kindred local to my area, and we had a pretty steady group of people show up to our events, and we celebrated our version of the Wheel of the Year, and then we would get together and study the Eddas and the sagas, but I don't know, for me it just kind of felt, I reached a point where I felt like it was too simple, I guess is a good way to put it. Like there was something missing, like I had something that was on the surface level, kind of started looking and feeling like the right thing. And then I was introduced to Theodism. And Theodism is a group of, it's a specific tradition of Germanic heathenry that was started by a man named Garmund Lord, who lived in Watertown, New York. Still does. And they like everything in heathenry, people either adored them or despised them, but they were very strong in their belief that in order for a practice to be authentic, we have to reconstruct it as historically accurate as possible. And so their focus was in Anglo-Saxon language and culture. So many of their members could actually speak Old English, and that was one of the things they insisted on. They did a lot of their rituals in Old English, and so it served as a liturgical language, the same way Latin does in some Catholic practices. And it really sucked me in. Theodism taught me, well, I shouldn't say, well, it encouraged me to appreciate academics. And the academics is something that at this stage in my life I have a very complicated relationship with, a love-hate relationship. And that's where my love of comparative mythology originated. I started studying a lot of theories revolving Indo-European language and mythology and their evolution. I was introduced to the works of Jans Puval. I don't know if I pronounced that name correctly. Feel free to correct me if you'd like. Georges Dumézil. I read a lot of his works, and Victor Rydberg. I think that's, again, I don't know if I pronounced that one correctly, but I started reading as much as I could from all these people and several others, and it just opened a whole new world for me as far as understanding mythology and how it evolves and how the symbols change in accord to the worldview of the people who keep recycling and retelling these myths. Because that was one of the things that chapter of my life helped me to pick up on, was that as a people grow and change and have new experiences, their mythology changes to reflect that new experience. And it really helped me understand the role that mythology and folklore serve for a people, which is that is their repository of wisdom. In all the ages before writing, people had stories, and those stories they used as a way to preserve their life lessons and their experience, and it was something that one generation could pass to the next, each time adding elements of their own experience into the mix. So it was always growing, always changing, always evolving. Uh, but the various groups I was a part of at that time eventually fell apart due to their own internal political issues, usually power plays by individuals, or some, in one case, a leader just simply got fed up with all the internal drama and threw in the hat and said, "I'm done," and nobody really wanted to pick up the torch and run with it. Not until later, that is. But I met a lot of bad people in those years too. And when I say bad people, I mean, you know, we run into these sorts in the magical and pagan community all the time. People that are completely delusional, that just want to have some sort of title beside their name and be raised up on a pedestal high above everybody else, and just be in a position where they have this giant group around them that serves no other purpose other than stroking and inflating their ego. And that I ran into that a lot, and still do. Uh, so I eventually stepped away from Asatru, and as I was at this point in my life, which would have been my early 20s, I was starting to develop more of an interest in Western esotericism and the Western occult tradition. And so I just started focusing on that. And that became sort of my core for about a decade. I became a Freemason and met a lot of men in the Masonic fraternity with ties to other initiatic organizations and traditions like the Golden Dawn, as the big one, all of whom have ties to Hermetic philosophy in some way, shape, or form. And I started to get very intrigued and interested in that. And during those years, there was a lot of reading. There was a lot of studying. I also discovered the author John Michael Greer during those years, and he would become, and remain to this day, a very big influence in my perspectives, and a lot of his writings uh, would have a lifelong impact on my personal philosophy and my worldview. However, there was always this part in the back of this voice in the back of my mind that nagged me. I still had a love for Norse and Germanic mythology, and I kind of always got the feeling that there was a lesson that I was supposed to learn from my experience in heathenry that didn't quite stick. And eventually I went back to face it, because the landscape changed after about a decade of me taking some space from it. And so I kind of began looking around, and there was a lot of groups that no longer existed, a lot of leaders that were had thrown in the towel or turned out to be toxic people appeared to not be there anymore, the ones I had personal experience with anyway. And I got sucked back into it, and I mean hard. I sat down my Western esoteric studies and just completely re-immersed myself in that world again. And I eventually did have the experience I was supposed to have, and took away from it what I needed to take away from it. And in a nutshell, if I had to summarize it in a nutshell, one, and the most important lesson I was supposed to learn, that I should have taken away the first time, but I had to have the second experience for it to really sink in. I'm a Taurus, so I'm very stubborn, very hard-headed, and sometimes a lesson has to slap me around a little bit before it sticks. And this primary lesson, and it seems like something so simple, until you put it into practice and try to apply it. And that's the idea that you should never put your value as a person, your self-esteem, your sense of self-worth, and your confidence. You should never, ever, ever put those things into the hands of another human being. And that was one of the things that I stumbled on and wrestled with spiritually for so much of my young life. And I still wrestle with it today at 42 years old. I wrestle with it damn near daily. And just that's the idea of giving other people the power to determine my self-worth. You know, for so many of us, a lot of our quest, especially when we know, when we're children and we know we see the world differently, but we can't put it into words as to why. We can't explain what makes us different. And then we discover things like witchcraft, magic, and paganism, and all of a sudden we start connecting with things that help us understand ourselves. We start to have this need for validation, and it is so easy to let that need for validation become this handicap of giving other people this power to determine your self-worth. And when other people have that power, they use it to manipulate you, because they know you want that validation. You want that. You want to be initiated into the tribe, to be one of the people. You want an identity. You want a place in a community that gives you this sense of belonging and even a sense of destiny. And let me tell you, brothers, sisters, there's no shortage of people in this world looking to take advantage of people looking for that. And I had to learn that lesson the hard way, not once, but twice. And again, as I said, I still struggle with it. The other lesson that I pulled from it, that I should have learned the first time, but it took me twice for it to all sink in and compute and make sense and stick, was the idea of Reconstructionism in and of itself. And I'm going to do a video on this concept alone so I can isolate it and focus on it. But I noticed in my personal experience that Reconstructionism has several struggles, multiple. And again, I will make another video doing more of a deep dive into that. But to sum this up, the point that's really pertinent as far as explaining this other lesson that I had to learn is that myth and folklore, sacred stories, lore, the sacred lore, these things do not exist in a vacuum. Because one of the mindsets that people in Reconstructionist traditions often fall prey to is this idea that lore and myth are only valid within a very specific window of time. There's this golden age that they idolize, whether it's the Viking period or Anglo-Saxon England or pre-Roman invasion Britannia, whatever. You can make anything a golden age and idolize it. But there's this idea that pure myth and pure lore, untainted, uncorrupted, practical, uh, and real and and trustworthy and believable, only exists within this narrow window of time. And that anything that existed before that time period is either impossible to reconstruct and therefore useless to try to grasp and understand, and that anything that comes after that window is tainted and corrupted, and therefore needs to be cleansed or purged. That mindset is trying to find a polite word for it. That mindset is just it's not realistic. It's not. Uh, as I said earlier, one of the things I started processing early on was this idea that myth and lore are they're fluid. They're a repository of wisdom. And when you isolate lore in one time period and codify it and say, this is it, this is the lore in its pure form, and anything before it, too old to be relevant, too old to understand, anything after is tainted and corrupted, you're taking the sacred and putting it in a box and saying this is the only truth and this is the absolute. And that's the same thing that Abrahamic religions do. Is they say, here's the book, here's the holy book. Nothing else is holy, nothing else is sacred. Anything before it is evil. Anything that came afterward is tainted and corrupted. Within these pages are the only pure lore you're going to find. That's the same mindset that you find in Reconstruction, in a lot of Reconstructionist traditions. Can't really say all of them because I haven't interacted with all of them. I can only speak for the ones I personally have interacted with, either in person or online, or books that I have read. And the scary thing is when you take that purity mindset, that myth and lore purity mindset of here's the only window where lore is valid. Anything after that is tainted and corrupted, and we have to purge the taint and corrupt out of it before we can get anything valid out of it. Man, if you took that mindset and put it in a different context, let's say race and genetics, it starts to look like something that's really not that pretty. Those particular those particular beliefs usually don't lead people to happy endings. So I don't think I need to get much more explicit than that. I think everyone listening here is smart enough to pick up what I'm laying down. So that being said, rather than trying to purge the world of tainted beliefs and ideas, I learned to accept the world for what it is in the here and now, because that's one of the other toxic mindsets that Reconstructionist beliefs can lead to, is that the here and now is tainted and flawed, and it's an abomination, and we just need to turn back the clock 2,000 years and everything will be okay, and we'll just pick up where the distant ancestors left off and live like the last 2,000 years of history didn't happen. And that's not a realistic that's not a realistic worldview. It just isn't. Time passes, whether we want it to or not, whether we like it or not, and we don't have any power over that. Now, I think it's important to understand the spiritual ideas and values of our distant ancestors, because it helps us put our own it helps us make sense of our own to understand how religious and spiritual ideas evolved. But I am not a Viking. I'm not a I'm not a fifth century Anglo-Saxon. I'm not a pre-Roman conquest Celt. I'm none of those things. I am descended from several of those groups of people, and I would like to have an understanding of their worldview, as best I can anyway. But I know I live in a very different world from the one they lived in. And I accept that as truth, as to where a lot of people who pursue the Reconstructionist path don't want to accept that truth, because they hate the present so much. And that was the other thing that was spread in those circles, just this burning hatred of the present world, and this desire to dismantle it and rebuild it and turn back the clock to the way people lived and saw the world 2,000 years ago. And at times you're flirting with and at other times completely embracing delusional beliefs. And I don't feel like it's healthy. And I really don't mean to sound like I'm trash talking people who embrace Reconstructionist ideas. And I mean no disrespect whatsoever. I do think elements of Reconstructionist thinking can be beneficial, especially when using critical thinking skills to assess and analyze and understand beliefs of the past. People in the Reconstructionist movement produce awesome works trying to delve into the spiritual beliefs of our ancestors, and all that information is very valuable. But I think that we need to understand it in a different context, and that would be the past is the past. It's there for us to learn from. But that's water under the bridge. It's water deep down in the well that has already come and gone. I think that information is valuable for us to make use of to understand our past, so that we can plan a better future. All that I've tried my best to summarize my experience with Reconstructionism without derailing 10,000 times, and I hope I communicated that effectively and clearly. Why I went there, why I left, why I came back, and why I finally made peace with it and left it behind. So it was somewhere around 2019 when I just said goodbye for good to Reconstructionism. I started picking up the things that inspired me in the beginning of my journey. I started reassessing why my journey even started to begin with, and it's good to do that from time to time. Go back to where you began, and figure out, basically let yourself come full circle, and then reassess, and then start a new journey, start a new chapter. And so once I started to process, the things that I needed to get from the experience, I started looking back into witchcraft, because I missed it. The idea of building relationships with ancestors and land spirits, that really called to me. And the idea of connecting with seasonal shifts and celestial shifts, finding a way to bridge that gap between microcosm and macrocosm. Those were the things that were important to me. And I remember I was in a Books-A-Million, and I was passed through their New Age section, and a book caught my eye that had been recommended to me a few times by people who said, this is a very different perspective on witchcraft, and James, I think you would enjoy it. And that was The Crooked Path by Keldon. And boy, did it give me a different perspective. Some of the things that Keldon talks about in the beginning of the book, where he's talking about the history of what we now call traditional witchcraft, some of the names he brought up I had heard before. Cochrane and Mr. Cecil. Uh, I had heard those names before, but I didn't really understand how they played into the story of modern witchcraft. And Keldon's book was very enlightening on that, and offered a drastically different approach to witchcraft that I had really never been exposed to. And so I started working with some of the elements in his book, and he mentioned Gemma Gary, in a name which I had never heard of at that point. So I started investigating her, and she was obviously very influential to him. And I did eventually find this book, which just yet again opened all sorts of doors of knowledge for me and helped me make sense of the story of modern witchcraft. And Miss Gary is an amazing writer. I even love her tone, the way she writes. She has this way of being very stern at times when she's trying to drive a point home, but she's also a very gentle and respectful guide. I get the feeling that if I ever spoke with her in person, she'd be a wonderful person to have a conversation with, and to where she would be, she would stand her ground on the things that are important to her, but she would also be very compassionate and understanding when listening to you. And we need more people like that in this world. And from there, I also discovered an author named Roger Horn, whose works also spoke to me on a deep level, as well as I found a lot of inspiration in Robin Artisan. And I now am working with a couple of different groups of people who are building their practices based on his work, as well as some of the other authors I've just mentioned. And what I like about operating in that vein, in the vein of traditional witchcraft, is I feel like there's definitely a chain of lore and 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 practice that I can pull from, but it encourages me to build my own relationship with the spirits I work with, and without dictating who they have to be or what they have to look like, or how they have to be tied in with other elements of the practice. Uh, and it gives me what I feel to be a more solid framework, but in a way that allows me to make it much more personal. And I think the focus in a lot of the traditional witchcraft books I read, the focus is more about the proof is in the pudding. The evidence is in the results. Here are all these different ways to get from point A to point B, but as long as you get to point B, that's really all that matters in the end. And my practice doesn't have to look the same as anybody else's practice to be valid. The validation comes in results, not in adherence to, uh, dogmatic beliefs and practices. So I feel like I have a little bit more, power in the practice that I build. And that may seem like such a simple thing, but it makes all the difference in the world. Uh, so that is how traditional witchcraft became the primary well I drink from. But I drink from many other wells, and that's okay. You can drink from as many wells as you want, uh, just so long as you don't stop learning and don't stop growing. You can drink from as many wells as your heart desires. And the other one I drink from is Revival Druidism, uh, mostly inspired by John Michael Greer's books. But I recently acquired Ivan Macbeth. I think it's the Bardic Book of Becoming, which is proving to be an interesting read. I have also become very fond of Emma Restall Orr. Very unique, wonderful ideas about Druidry. Uh, and then an author that kind of straddles the fence like me, Joanna van der Hoeven. Uh, the only critique I've heard from some people is that she, they say that she feels a little more Wiccan, and I can see where she has a lot of Wiccan inspiration, which I don't believe that's a bad thing, not at all. But she has this wonderful blend of modern revival Druidism, uh, various flavors of witchcraft, and she's kind of woven her own unique practice, which is kind of the same thing I'm trying to do. So I do take some inspiration from her, and I'll probably start doing some episodes here where I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on the books that I found to be the most helpful and inspirational, uh, and uh, and why I thought they were. So this is where I'm going to cut off my introduction, my long-winded introduction. Between the first video and this one, you're going to have you've had about an hour of me trying to summarize my life story. And I guess if I want to, give a good little summary of what my journey's all about, what started it, and where I plan to go with it, because I think, with all the drama I got sucked into over the years, that's something I lost sight of. And I think that happens to a lot of us over time. We get caught up in all this, all this organizational and interpersonal drama that a lot of us lose connection with why we started this journey to begin with. And for me, it was a desire to find truth. Because I feel like in this world, so many people settle for illusions. They settle for the fantasy of something because it's easier to construct and maintain a fantasy than to work for and achieve the real thing. Uh, and you can apply that to a multitude of different facets of human existence, and it's there. A lot of times people will settle for the illusion or the fantasy of something if getting the real thing is too hard. And I got tired of settling for fantasies and illusions. I wanted to find something real. And I got so frustrated and angry over the years when it seemed like every group or tradition I tried to connect with, nobody really cared about the truth. They had a person or a group of people who created a delusion, a fantasy, and the goal was to take in as many people as possible to validate it. And that was really the core of it. That was the nature of the interaction. From an atheistic perspective, maybe all religious and spiritual groups do that. Who can get the most people to buy their delusion and get it validated by the most people. And I just got tired of it. And that's when I realized that in my quest for truth, that's a personal thing. And I've got to find it in here first before I'm ever going to find some expression of it in other people. And that goes back to what I needed to learn from Asatru is stop giving other people the power to determine my self-worth and my destiny. And along with that goes, don't give other people the power to dictate truth to me. uh, learn to accept my inner truth and accept the truth as I see it in my own experience, and realize that there are some truths I will never know the totality of. Uh, my brain ain't big enough, and uh, and it's not so much attaining it that's important anyway. It's the quest and everything the quest teaches us along the way. Truth is something we should always be open-minded about because our perceptions and notions of it can change. It changes with our life experience, just like that mythology does. As every generation discovered new things, the mythology would change to preserve that discovery so they could pass it on. Truth is evolving too. It always is. At least our perception of it. And I think that's where we learn the most, is accepting the fact that truth is not a destination. It's a journey. And I just needed to learn to love the journey and accept the journey. So all that being said, now you know at least the basics of where I came from and how I got to be here. Uh, I look forward to sharing this journey with you. Again, it's nice to meet you. Now let's enjoy that journey.